Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Storytime from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. The story we have for you today comes from Asia, from the country in the region around Vietnam. And it's a story about a young girl and the two men who wanted to marry her. The legend of the monsoon rains. Once, long ago, there was an emperor whose name was Hung Vuong. And Hung Vuong was a very powerful emperor, but the most precious thing that he had was his daughter. Her name was Minh Vuong. Now, Minh Vuong was a very beautiful young woman and very gentle too. She was graceful as a willow, had a voice like a nightingale, and her face was as smooth and as pure as a lotus blossom. She was so perfect that her father wanted to find her the very best, most perfect husband that he could find for her. And so he began to look. And suitors came from all around to try to win the Princess Minh Vuong's hand, for the news of her beauty had gone far and wide. And many men came, and some were handsome, and some were rich, and some were wise, and some were a combination of them, but none of them were the right combination for the emperor to choose them as Minh Vuong's husband. And Minh Vuong began to feel that her father would never decide. And she went to her mother and she said, "Mother, my father is never going to pick a husband for me. He wants someone too perfect." And her mother said, "Be patient, my dear, and trust your father's judgment. He is a very great emperor, and you are his precious daughter. He has to find you the perfect husband." Well, one day, Minh Vuong was out in the garden practicing on her instrument and watching the lilies float across the pond when she heard the gong sound. Now, she knew from previous experience that the gong meant there was a new suitor at the gate, waiting to see her father. And Minh Vuong looked at her handmaid and she said, "Why do I even go and look? Father will reject this one again. I wish I had been born with some flaws so that father would not think I was so perfect, and he would not be trying to find me the perfect husband. Perhaps then I would be happily married by now." But Minh Vuong was curious, and so she went over to the wall and she climbed up on a bench and she peeked over. She could just see over the top of the wall if she stood up on the bench. And she peeked over the top, and what she saw made her gasp. There was not one suitor at the gate. Oh no, there were two. Both of them were quite handsome as far as Minh Vuong could see from this distance, and they both of them rode in beautiful and lavishly decorated palanquins. It's a kind of a platform that their servants carry on their shoulders with poles, and they have beautiful coverings over the top of them. And both of the young men were riding in beautifully decorated palanquins, and both of them had servants wearing brocaded silk, carrying them in their palanquins. Well, Minh Vuong turned and she jumped down off of that bench and she ran as fast as she could to where her father was waiting to receive them on his golden throne. And she said, "Please, father, please choose one of these two young men. They are both so wonderful to look upon." And her father stroked his long beard and he said, "Well, perhaps, my daughter, we shall see." A few moments later, the young men were announced, and they came in, both of them, with their robes flowing behind them and their boots clacking upon the floor as they approached the emperor in his great dragon-shaped throne. And as they came closer, one of them stepped forward, and in a quiet and sincere and gentle voice he said, "O great emperor, I am Son Tin, the lord of the mountains. The steepest hills, the deepest rivers, the darkest jungles, the rugged cliffs, and the cascading waterfalls are all in my kingdom. I have fierce tigers, mighty elephants, and timid deer in my kingdom. The rare and delicious fruits and fragrant flowers grow in abundance in my gardens. And jade, emerald, gold, and all of the things that come from the mountains are laid at my feet in my golden palace. If you give me the Princess Min Wang as my wife, she will sleep in a bed of jasmine and orchids, and I will give her every happiness as long as we both shall live. Well, he stepped back, and Min Wang looked at him, and she thought, well, he is quite handsome, and he is very rich and powerful, but he sounds as though he is kind as well. He would certainly be a perfect suitor. And then the second young man stepped forward. He had a bold step, and he held his head at a haughty angle, and he said, "O great emperor, I am Toi Tin, the lord of the seas. My underwater realm is far more vast than the mountains. Precious pearls, rare coral, and all of the treasures lost by the sailors at the sea belong to me. All of the creatures of the ocean, the blue whale, the fierce shark, they sing and obey my every command. I can make the winds wail and spin. I can make the waters crash upon the shores, and I can toss ships like sticks in a pond. Should you give me the Princess Min Wang as my bride, she will sleep in a mother-of-pearl shell, and she will be the queen of the seas, reigning at my side forever." And when he stepped back, Min Wang looked at him, and she thought, well, he is quite handsome, and he is very confident and clearly very rich and powerful. He has a fiery temperament, but that could be a good thing. These two, they were both perfect suitors. She was so excited. Perhaps this would be the day that she would be allowed to be married and to join her husband and to learn of the new happiness of the married life. The emperor thought for a bit, and he stroked his beard. And then he stood up and he said, "I have decided. You are both most worthy suitors. And so, whoever arrives at the first ray of sunlight with the engagement gifts shall be granted the hand of Princess Min Wang in marriage." And he lifted his golden sword and he waved it over the two young men's head. "So I have spoken." And so the two young men went away. Song Tin went back to the mountains, and he ordered that all of the precious jewels and exotic birds, rare and fragrant flowers, and most delicious fruits of his kingdom be brought and prepared. And then he went to sleep, to rest, so that he could be at the palace at the first ray of sunlight. Toi Tin went back to the ocean, and he summoned all of his servants, and he said, "Bring me the most shimmering pearls, the most colorful coral, and prepare the most delicious seafood dishes." And when all was in readiness, rather than going to sleep and getting a good night's rest, Toi Tin threw a lavish celebration party for all of his subjects, and they drank and they sang and they danced, for he was going to marry the Princess Min Wang. Never mind that he hadn't won her yet. They had a great party, and they danced and sang and drank until well into the night. Well, early the next morning, before it was light, Princess Min Wang was awake, and she got herself dressed in her wedding clothes, and she waited to find out which of the two young men would be her husband. And as the sun began to the light began to grow, 100 servants were seen coming down the road from the mountains with Son Tin in his palanquin. And as the first rays of sunlight, the sun just peeked over the horizon, they arrived at the palace gates, and they went in and they laid their beautiful gifts of jewels and birds and flowers and fruits in front of the emperor. And the emperor said, "Congratulations, my son. Here is my daughter." And he took Son Tin and he took Min Wang by the hand, and he joined their hands together, and they were married. And there was a great feast, And then Son Tin helped Min Wang into their palanquin, and they were just about to leave when suddenly they saw a crowd of more people coming up from the sea. And Son Tin cried out and he said, "I am sorry, my friend, but you are too late. Min Wang is my bride now." Thoi Tin was not happy to hear that. He cried out, "You have cheated. You came before the light." He drew his sword and he said, "My servants, seize the princess. She is to be my bride." And Son Tin drew his sword and he said, "My servants, protect your queen. Tigers, leopards, elephants, monkeys, pythons, all the creatures of the mountains, come and fight for me. Protect me and my bride from this cruel man." And Thoi Tin called out and he said, "All of the creatures that crawl the bottoms of the sea and swim in its midst, come and fight for me and take back my bride from this thief." And suddenly the waves began to howl and the winds began to swirl and the ocean began to come higher and higher and higher on the shore. And as Son Tin and his crowd climbed the mountains with his bride, he threw lightning bolts down at Thoi Tin and his people, and he ripped up trees and he threw them down the mountainside. And Thoi Tin continued to come, and the waves came with him. Very soon, huts began to wash away. The rice fields were flooded. Villagers fled for their lives before the battle of the two lords of the mountain and the sea. As they came higher and higher, every river overflowed. Innocent villagers drowned, for that is the way with war. Very often, the innocent are killed. Humans and animals scrambled for safety. The two lords, the Lord of the Mountains and the Lord of the Seas, battled for weeks. Villagers pled to their ancestors, bowing down before altars, praying that the two lords would tire of their destructive war. Finally, Son Tin caused his favorite mountain to rise higher and higher and higher towards the sky until it was taller than anything else on earth. And finally, Thoi Tin saw that he could not win, for his waves could not reach that high, and so he retreated back to the sea with all of his creatures, and the waters settled back to where they should be. The villagers came back and they began to rebuild their homes and replant their fields, and they found that the rice fields grew so much faster now because all of the good soil had come up from the riverbeds and down from the mountains during the battle. And you would think that Thoi Tin would be, well, he would be defeated, but he would be satisfied because he could not win Min Wang now. She lived with her husband, Son Tin, on the highest mountain. But he was not. Every year, around June in the Western calendar, he comes out of the ocean and he tries again to win Princess Min Wang for himself. And then the rains come fast and heavy, and the winds bend the trees, and the waves crash on the shore. And that is why the monsoon rains come every year to Vietnam, and how the waves crash and the fields are renewed every year. And that is the legend of the monsoon rains from Vietnam. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join us again on Friday at 3 p.m. Central Time. We will have another story for you from somewhere around the world, coming to you live from the Milledgeville Public Library of Illinois. Bye, everybody.